evening, we take on 4 pressing issues shaping Jamaica's national conversation, from digital sovereignty to public safety, education reform, and a local attorney seeking to make history. We'll hear from the experts, officials, and those directly impacted as we chase the stories taking the lead. Good evening, I'm Nika Lewis, and Lead Story begins now. On Wednesday, the Director General for the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, Commander Alvin Gale, answering questions from members of Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, revealed that the government does not own the Support Jamaica website. It was used to coordinate relief donations for victims of Hurricane Melissa. Well, the revelation has raised questions about data governance and cybersecurity. Is an arrangement like this standard practice? Who owns the information Jamaicans submitted through this platform, and what safeguards are in place to protect that data? Joining me now for this conversation is cyber expert and CEO of Adtelligent, Mr. Craig Powell. Welcome, Mr. Powell.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. But we're talking about ownership accountability to start things off, because if the government doesn't own this Support Jamaica website, Mr. Powell, who ultimately controls it, and what risks does that pose for national disaster response?
Well, there are definitely risks that it posed in that case, but I think what the government would have done was make a decision in a timely manner, because the expertise to build a site such as this might not have been available on staff through any government entity, because government, usually procures these things. And Amber would have been an entity that has a known relationship with the government, is a government supplier, is a registered person with, PPC, that's public procurement certificate, to do these types of works. And they would have a relationship with the political directorate as well, where they feel comfortable with Amber doing something like this. So I wasn't in the room when a conversation like this happened, but I suppose either they nominated themselves to do it, or the government asked them, whichever one. And when they nominated, they could, as private individuals, go ahead and do it very rapidly. And the government felt that this was a trustworthy entity to go ahead and do that in a time where, nobody was working during the hurricane. And I think the government made that decision, knowing that risk that, okay, how do we procure something like this? It's not possible. It's a hurricane. Nobody's really working. Let's just go ahead and do that. And then let's capture donations.
So in a case like this, when it concerns data protection, for example, who would you suppose would own the personal and financial information, in this case, that Jamaicans would have submitted through the platform? And how would we safeguard that against misuse? As an expert, only from what you're able to share.
Amber has a data protection controller, and so does Adtelligent. So the data protection controller of Amber would be the person who would, be the licensed government, because everyone who has a data protection, by the Data Protection Act, has to actually register with the government. So it would be that person who would be the ultimate overseer or controller, right? Which is normal, because my company, we're the data protection controller for other government entities as well when the government procures, our services. So that's actually a normal relationship for the data control officer to be outside of the government entity, but ultimately have to report. I just think this was something to do with the speed, and therefore the usual transmissions never happened. So I don't think it's that concerning, because Amber is a data controller for many other government entities. For example, Amber Pay does all of the tolls, the online, which has lots of traffic. So they already are familiar with government data and the data of Jamaican citizens. So I don't think that's much of a big deal, and they are certified to handle that data.
Okay, so in terms of the cybersecurity standards, we could say that it's standard practice. Is it standard practice internationally for disaster relief websites to be privately owned? You did say it's somewhat normal.
No, that's not the case. It's that the other countries are more prepared with these entities, so government would be providing that service, even if it's a private contractor who did it. I think what happened is our government, although we're prepared in other angles, right, we were not prepared for this part, and therefore they had to do extreme measures, which is okay, who is a supplier who we trust, who, if they have questions like this, they could point and say, well, Amber has the expertise, Amber has been doing this for us before. It's okay that we use them as a platform. And I think that's the decision that they make. I can't speak for them,
Yes.
but that would be the case. And again, it is not unusual for data control officers to be located outside of the government, right? For other entities which have even more, I would say, financial information, because that's normal practice. Government has lots of transactions, and they have suppliers who are outside of the government entity who have to sign an NDA and all these other things. It's just that during the time of this, I don't think those regular procedures would have been followed. And ultimately, yes, the Amber should transfer ownership to the government, but it now needs to be procured. And you have to say, what's the price of that? What's this? Is this a donation? These questions have to be asked, which I'm glad that we're asking now, so Amber and the government can respond. But I understand why they would have made those decisions in such a rapid manner.
So in this case, what minimum cybersecurity standards should therefore apply, based on this arrangement? What are some of the questions should we be asking?
You have the right to delete, so that's very important, right? So under the Jamaica Cybersecurity Act, not Cybersecurity, the Data Protection Act, which follows the EU standards, you have the right to erasure, as well as to see any of the data that people are collecting on you. And the data controller, the register controller, Amber, is the person in charge of that. So their database, you should be able to erase yourself from the data if you want, right? And you're not supposed to be able to just send out the data to, non-specified bodies. And I would hope, I haven't looked at it, but on the website, they should have had a release to say this is where the data is going, right? So those are the things that they should have done. And I'm not sure if they did, I didn't look into it or say that, but Amber is a company that is, certified by the government as following the data protection standards and being abreast and aware with it. So it would be, I would assume that they would follow the same practices. But again, the website went up quickly, and there's some things that when you're doing it for speed, you don't necessarily consider. You might just say, okay, let's put these things up, and they might not have, put all the notices that you're supposed to put legally required by, collecting data in Jamaica.
How does this revelation affect, therefore, public confidence in donating or engaging with the national relief efforts? And what can be done to restore this trust?
So I do think there is a trust that goes down a little bit, right? But again, the government has to say, well, Amber's a supplier. We do X amount of millions of dollars with them through other industries and through other ministries. They're a legit company, which they are. These are the practices that they follow, which they do. And this is why we made this choice, because we don't have the capacity internally, which is, I think, a very legitimate thing to do. And then what the government should do ahead of time is basically just say, look, well, just like Nigel Clark put in, government bond, these are the type of things.
Preemptive measures.
Exactly, procure things immediately. Like Darrell Vaz, in my opinion, although he is wrong technically, he was correct to get the Starlings. You need internet for the country to work. You need to be able to communicate to police. That's great. But, technically there was no measure to allow him to do that. So I think preemptively we should say, if you're in a national disaster, a hurricane, these are the emergency procedures that allow us to procure. Maybe a couple ministers sign off, or some technical director or CTDs of certain government entities. So you have some sort of measure that seems legitimate and up to a certain amount that we can procure immediately on the signature. And so then we can say, oh, well, there was a hurricane, a national category 5 disaster, which has never happened before in this hemisphere for like 50, 60 years, a crazy amount of time. And we can say, well, this person signed, that person signed, we did it quickly, it was via WhatsApp, which we wrote into our, law, that because maybe that's the only way to communicate, or we did it in a meeting and we recorded it on our phone, and we're procuring this service from these contractors, which might even have to be at an extraordinary rate, because now get people to come and work during a hurricane, which is, that's hard to do because people are thinking about themselves and their own family. So I think if we just admit that, hey, this is what happened, and just prepare ahead of time, I don't think the Jamaican public will feel negative about that, just saying, look, it was the first time this has ever happened to us, and we did some things right, and some other things I think we can improve on.
Should Jamaica therefore be moving toward a legislation mandating government ownership of critical disaster response platforms, and what effective digital governance should look like?
Yeah, we should be doing that, but we should also be moving to giving us laws to allow for emergency procurement during the hurricane and during disasters. To me, it makes sense that our government should be allowed during a Category 5 hurricane, which is a non-normal disaster, to procure things from private sector with extreme measure, right? That makes sense. And we shouldn't necessarily, I mean, you should have audit trails and other things, but we can have simplified audit trails to say, well, we're a small island developing state, we are still a third world country, right? What is a legitimate way to do business in a hurricane when things are happening? Is it going to be a WhatsApp? Will it be email? What would be a legit request? What can we consider legal, tender? And I think those are the questions that we can ask during the calm. So when the hurricane comes, we're not like freaked out by the type of decisions that the government is going to make. And this could be regardless of our parties in charge, right? Because we do want the government to have the ability to buy life, important things, including the donation mechanism, because that was important, although the money didn't necessarily go out, because those reports, do exist that the money wasn't spent right away. But again, that's just because it's very hard for government to procure things. And I think the whole methodology of procurement needs to change to allow some flexibility when there's the urgency.
Should the government have said this to the people immediately after, or is this reasonable time that we know about it only through probing from the PAC?
I think the government, specifically the political directorate, is very busy doing so many different things, and I give them the grace. I think now that we know, of course, they could have said earlier, but again, ICT is something that not everyone understands, right? And we need to probably have a designated person who's going to be in charge of ICT that we can,
Yes.
that's the guy that we're going to question. Like he said, okay, Minister Tufton for health. Okay, great. You have Floyd for agriculture. Matthew Samuda out there for environment. Okay, Dalvaz, the man for transport energy. But ICT is important. And who is that person going to be, right? And it might not necessarily be, Dana, who is doing a lot of other things, right? And she's doing great in digital transformation. But, ICT data security is something that's also important. And maybe you want an officer who is going to be, the spokesperson for that, who can think ahead of time and work in a legislative manner to work on these issues. So to me, it's a lesson learned, but it's not an opportunity lost. Jamaica, in my opinion, did well, and we can do better, and we can obviously put in a legislation here. And I would give the government the encouragement to say, hey, look, we're slightly annoyed, but we understand. Can you guys go ahead and make this a more transparent manner in the future? Because we understand that we are in a disaster-prone zone. So let's create laws that, allow you guys to do the thing in an expeditious, proper way in the future.
All right. Thanks so much, cyber expert and CEO of Adtelligent, Mr. Craig Powell. We take a break. More after these.
At Hawkeye, we work hard to develop state-of-the-art security solutions like our new Total Connect smart home automation system that gives you 24/7 access to control your appliances, lights, cameras, and doors using your smartphone, tablet, or PC. As the most trusted electronic security company in Jamaica, Hawkeye has the fastest response times to get to you when you need us most. Trust Hawkeye's Total Connect. Hawkeye, securing what matters most.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The Time by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Welcome back. On Tuesday, 10-year-old Shania Coke was raped and killed in Troy, Trelawney. According to reports, her alleged attacker was only recently released from prison after serving a 2-year sentence for buggery committed against another child. It's also being alleged that the court ordered the now deceased man to stay away from the community where both tragedies happened. But alas, the horrific incident is now reigniting talks about whether Jamaica's sex offenders registry should be made public and whether the current penalties for sex offenders are enough. Also, what happens once they complete their sentences? We're being joined now by attorney at law Janice Gordon, and shortly we should be joined by gender specialist and social commentator Dr. Nadine Spence. So let's go to it. Welcome, Attorney Gordon.
Thank you for having me.
From a legal standpoint, what responsibility does the state have to enforce court orders restricting offenders from certain communities?
Well, once a person is registered on our sexual offender registry, there are certain reporting criteria and monitoring aspects that the state would have to undertake, and that person would have to conform to certain reporting conditions. They'd also have to inform the police when they plan to travel or if they change their address within a certain time frame.
And are current penalties, would you say, for sex offenses against children sufficient under Jamaica's laws, or do they need some strengthening?
That question might be subjective. However, currently, each case will be done on a case-by-case basis, and the sentence is always left up to the discretion of the judge and our statute, of course. And for an offense such as rape, you're looking at 15 years, the most for that offense. And I would generally say it is sufficient. However, each case has to be looked on for its specificities and the intricacies of that particular case.
Understood. From where you sit, what are some of the things that the people would generally be able to ask of the justice system in such a situation? A situation where you have someone who's served time, done time, has been reintegrating in society, and in some case may even reoffend. How do community members respond properly without taking matters into their own hands?
Right, and I think that will lead back to potentially making the sex offender registry made public. If persons know that this particular person has committed a certain sexual offense, they're on the registry, they would be put on alert to know that this person is residing close within my community, within my workplace, within certain areas of society. And without that knowledge, unless you know through the grapevine or otherwise, you would be aware that this person is actually a registered offender. So steps that community members can take is really making more public appeals for the registry to be made public so that they can be aware and take the necessary steps and precautions to safeguard themselves and their children.
This story is just one of many, and you mentioned that community members can do that. However, I recall many moons ago where we had another incident where a child in St. Catherine was similarly murdered, or I should say killed. Murder is assumed by the court, right? And so in that incident, I remembered policymakers saying we're going to have to take some serious we'll have to revisit the law, we'll have to consider, these things that the public have been calling for, making the sex offenders registry public, all of that. And yet we're here again, probably years later, months later, having another conversation about the publication of that information around sex offenders in your communities. Tell me, attorney, when a sex offender, for example, served time, has been charged, whatever has happened, and they've done their time in the justice system, are they immediately returned to society just so?
Well, in terms of serving your sentence, it is a form of rehabilitation, and you would generally be placed, try to be reintegrated into society, and that's where the monitoring and reporting criteria would be put in place for that offender to conform to while out.
Are there immediate legislative changes that could close gaps in monitoring and sentencing, for example?
In terms of the monitoring aspect, our Sexual Offences Act do speak to that particular requirement of the offenders. Although in terms of making the registry itself public, that would have to be, the legislation would have to be amended and things would have to be put in place for it to be made public and for even the monitoring aspect of it to be more robust.
Yeah, because let me understand, if, for example, resident 1 is considered a notorious sex offender, he's been to jail or prison 4 times in his lifetime and he's out again looking to reoffend, how does the monitoring, or should really the monitoring work to stem that from happening? Because you did say they went to prison, so them served time, and we're expecting that they should have been rehabilitated. But we do know that our systems cannot guarantee 100% rehabilitation. So let's be realistic. How are we going to fix this if the monitoring is not as strong as it should be, and we know that there is a possibility of recidivism?
That is true and understandable. So that is where our policymakers would have to come in, making the monitoring aspect more robust. Because it is true, you have persons who are repeated sex offenders, and the question really is, how do we guard against any other possibly reoccurrence of this? And so the policymakers would have to step in, make it more robust and mandatory for persons, especially where they're repeated sex offenders, to possibly be integrated into certain programs and to make the rehabilitation more sustainable so that we don't have repeated reoccurrences.
All right, Attorney Gordon, I'm understanding we have a clip of the Trelawney Police openly discussing the matter of the latest that's happened with the case in Troy. And we have Superintendent Velanie Campbell speaking about what the police have been doing since the horrific incident in Tyre, Troy, Trelawney.
Superintendent Velanie Campbell, Commanding Officer for Trelawney Division. Today, the management team of Trelawney Division, supported by CSS headquarters, visited the family member of 10 years old Shani Cook, who was killed in the community of Tyre District, Troy, Trelawney. We offered our deepest condolences and support. We understand that this is a very difficult time, not only for the family members and residents, but for the entire country. We are enlisting the support of residents for law and order to be maintained in the community. Yesterday, we had persons blocking the road and causing further instability. Please, I am imploring, desist from blocking the road and bringing further instability to your community. Thank you very much.
Commanding Officer for the Trelawney Police Division, Velanie Campbell. So, Attorney Gordon, we heard that the residents of Troy took law, or took what they perceived to be justice, into their own hands. There was a mob attack on the suspect and his father, and we know that the suspect demised, but the father survived. In this case, we understand that a resident was fingered in the matter and has since been taken into custody. How do society reconcile with this? What's the legal recourse for the people who are now saying you can't arrest one person when there was a mob incident? How does that work? Walk me through that.
And that has been a recurring event in communities across Jamaica, where I do understand the frustration of residents. However, when the law is looked at, it is not the correct way to go about situations like that in terms of taking matter into your own hands. And usually it is difficult for even the police to identify who really was the main perpetrator for this particular incident. And usually they try to apprehend the principal for those events in terms of a mob attack. And it's quite unfortunate. However, our law is premised on the fact that perpetrators of any crime, even if it might be justified in your own mind, that you must face some consequences.
You mentioned the principle of the attack, and so how does one decide, especially with such, I don't want to be the person to try the case, but how do you decide who the principal is?
Right, and it's quite difficult to identify who do you arrest in such a situation when several persons would have, carried out a certain attack. And I believe the police would have their own mechanisms, and they would conduct their investigations within the community to try to find out which persons were directly involved and who should face legal consequences.
And so what sort of sentencing perhaps could one encounter should they decide that somebody in my community did something we don't appreciate, all of us going to group up, gang him and do the ultimate? What sort of sentencing should we be considering or anticipating for something like that?
Well, we have pre-established sentencing in respective statutes. So it would depend on the offense that was actually committed. Was it wounding? Was it murder? What was the outcome? And then the sentencing would be based on the particular offense as categorized.
All right. What should we take away from this? We see where the police have said we're urging the citizens to work with us. We're offering support to the victim's family. And in this case, it would be two families. But she specifically mentioned the family of the 10-year-old who was gruesomely killed. And, the country mourns with that family, but there's another family in mourning too, because many people are asking, how do you even determine that that person you attacked and killed is actually the individual? So what should we take away from this?
I mean, it is a sad situation, and I offer my condolences to the families as well. And it keeps reoccurring in communities across Jamaica. It's quite unfortunate. And how do we guard against this going forward? You have to understand the frustration of community members. If you would have known that this particular person is a sex offender, as humans, the next action would be to take matters in your own hands. But really, the law would not support that, and as such, we have to allow the police to conduct their investigations and for due process to take its course. However, I do believe in terms of the registry itself, as I would have been mentioning from the start, that our policymakers would have to make changes, look at the advantages and the disadvantages of making the registry public, and for that particular aspect to take its course.
Thank you so much, Attorney at Law Janice Gordon. Unfortunately, we didn't get the presence of social commentator and gender advocate Dr. Nadine Spence, but we'll continue on with the program. Do stay with us for much more after these.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Watch Walking on the Word with Apostle Professor J. Andrew Scott every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m.
An apostle, cause 3 contracts to be released to you. So as of tonight, the realm of the supernatural is active and activated to cause 3 contracts. Pow! 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 In Jesus' name.
me and the style is no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress, you charge me to sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early? But Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
Welcome back. Over 4 years after the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission submitted its 365 recommendations to reform the island's education system, 43% of the recommendations have now been implemented. This was revealed at the latest Education Transformation Oversight Committee press conference. Also coming out of that press briefing, the government says consultations on the Jamaica Teaching Council bill are now complete. But what does that progress actually look like? How significant is the JTC bill to transforming the education sector? And what still needs to happen before the Commission's vision becomes a reality? Joining me now is President of the National Parent-Teacher Association of Jamaica, Mr. Stuart Jacobs. Welcome, Mr. Jacobs.
Hello, your listeners.
Absolutely. So is 43% implementation enough progress after years of reform discussions?
It is. It is, in fact, the fact that they are on target at the 43% of implementation, because you see the numbers speak for themselves, and it's a sustained momentum that has happened, and we have to congratulate the team led by the goodly leader. He and his team has done a tremendous job because they're on track. I'm also very impressed with the fact that they have achieved, of the recommendation, the 13 that have been achieved, and one of them that really stands out from is governance and accountability. Yes. Because there's a change management, and I like the fact that most happy with the fact that it's the education officers that the governance and accountability, because they are the field workers, they are on the ground, ensuring that the school machinery is working, and that is a good sign that they got a thumbs up on that of achievement. Early childhood is great, because early childhood is where it all begins, and what that does, it sets the foundation for primary and secondary and tertiary. The curriculum teaching and teacher training, parents are happy for that in Jamaica. Okay. Jamaican parents are happy for that because it means that there's a standard teaching, improved standard teaching.
So you can't just decide that you want to step down to the basic school and start teaching.
No, there's a standard of progression or moving laterally. So it's no longer I'm a teacher, I want to teach. You have to be well trained, and so that standard is I also am embracing a whole lot the increased spend on school support. It's not just a spend on the school support, but it is tailored and structured and zooming into meals, books, uniforms, and it ties in with that 55% increase that has been allocated to schools overall. The other thing that I like is that school boards, the minutes of school boards, you could see where there was a concerted effort. And why the parents are also impressed with that is that a PTA sits on a school board. In order for a school board, and this is law, in order for a school board to be fully constituted, there must be a representative of the PTA sitting on the school board. And what this is saying is that The minutes of school boards are now there, and therefore, when a board chairman speaks to a PTA, when a principal speaks to a PTA, us parents are feeling very satisfied that the board that is governing the school is in good keeping, is in good stead. Also, the fact that there have been the opening of parent place, two in Region 1 here and so on, is a place where parents can go to. And this is spearheaded by the National Parenting Support Commission, which works a great deal with the NPTAJ for parents, and it's mainly in what is called inner city, the marginalized communities, where parents can now go and have homework centers there. There's counseling centers there. That for me is good. Then there is the quality and the competent teacher training. There's a plan. 70%, imagine 70%, 76% of the annual budget is going for brain builder centers in inner city. It's not, so what the brain builder centers do is, this could have happened unless the EPOC machinery had given the task of those who are in charge to say, look, the days are over when you sit back and twiddle your thumb and give us a number. There's a target, it's driven, and it's going to be measured at the end of the program. And where the chips lie, let it lie.
So we're able to attain smarter outcomes.
Smarter outcomes and efficient, effective. The other thing that I like is that math. You could see where there's a concerted effort to zoom in on mathematics, the basic teaching, and so on. Development of the student is paramount.
Right.
And the fact that 32 of the schools that were affected in the hurricane, 32 of them are completely repaired, ready for September, while another 214 are under construction, almost to be completed. What this is saying to me is that the education system, with EPOC being the, let's call it, the watchdog, the pit bull, along with other agencies in the ministries working, and us, the NPTJ, the parents of Jamaica, are extremely proud today. Not everything is perfect. Not everything is perfect. We would have been so happy if we were that they were 10% or 15% ahead of target. But they're on target. But they're on target. And what is also quite, we must give credit where credit is due. We can be guaranteed that every term there's an update. So if things aren't going well, we are able to almost immediately cite the issues, and we can squeal and say, look, come back, something's wrong here. Minister, PS, something is wrong here. Because what is happening, we are getting information, update information.
Understood.
Up-to-date information, yes.
So what do you think is delaying or is accounting for the delay with the remaining recommendations?
It has to be done simultaneously with what has been achieved. And they are, and the hurricane would have slowed down a few stuff. And yes, it took too long. Let's not beat around the bush. It took too long for us to get here. But the fact is that we have reached a place where the pace is moving with much more alacrity. There is accountability in terms of the communication to us parents, where we can look forward to the middle of, going towards the end of the school term. Each school term, the middle month of the last school term, we are able to hear exactly what is happening. And I do hope that they continue to stick to the plan and achieve the target. And at the end of the day, when it is measured that we are within the budget that was supposed to be spent, and that the learnings from it will continue for a long time to come, and the next 15 years also, when this cohort of early childhood would have gone through tertiary and are now working and contributing to society, they can look back and say, I was a part of this process. Bear in mind that we had COVID and other mitigating circumstances that would have halted or slowed down the growth of the process. So for them to be coming out of that and for them to be on target of 43%, there should be lauded for it. And we are not going to accept any mediocrity, any slowing down, or coming back and say, oh, we are 1% off. We will not accept 1% off. You must be on target or ahead of target. It's simple as that.
Understood. I know you may have mentioned it in your earlier explanation of what was acceptable and what was welcomed during the conference, but the Jamaica Teaching Council bill, do you think this will fundamentally change accountability and professionalism in the teaching profession?
It will, and it ought to be something that we all hold hands with it and walk with it through the process. There are areas where some parties might not agree. I understand, and the opportunity exists for amendments. That the opportunity exists for deliberation and possible changing, as I said, the amendments. But overall, the experience so far,
yes,
from the planning of the bill shows where the gaps were, where the gaps are, and how to fix the gaps, and that is most important. And so the Jamaica Teaching Council bill is one that is to set the foundation to solidify in law what it is our education system is going to be accountable to, and where the circumstances lie when it is. In other words, if you don't do it, you're breaking the law. Before this, when it's not done, it would be a slap on the wrist, and somebody would point finger all over the place. No, that's not it. There is governance and policies in law that makes it quite clear where we are going, and the fact that it incorporates and includes so many different facets of the education system. No area was left out, and that is good, and that is why you're going to have so much rebargaining, if you want to call it, because what the bill does and what this EPOC system is doing is, I call it impact forecasting. You're looking at what is going to happen in the next 5 years, in the next 15 years, in the next probably 50 years. Where exactly is our education system supposed to be? Not what we want it to be, where it's supposed to be. We must be able to compete globally.
Will we be able to do all of this, though, if we're still having a hemorrhaging of teachers, especially specialist teachers?
Well, you'll notice that from the EPOC report, it did show where there was with 300 plus teacher retention.
We're going to have to pick up that dialogue another time, though, Mr. Jacobs, because that is all the time we have. President of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, Mr. Stuart Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us. We take a break. Stay with us.
with Apostle Professor J. Andrew Scott every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m.
Hallelujah. And then you have some people now where you look forward for them. They bring a joy to you. They make you laugh. When you see them, they make you give you a good vibe. And then people that you want around you, man. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Now follow me with your heavy self, man. Sure. Your heavy down, sir. Hallelujah.
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
What a guan?
What a guan?
That's a guan, pa.
What a guan?
What a guan? What a guan? Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
That's a guan, pa. What a guan?
Welcome back. We're in our final segment. Jamaica could soon make history on the international legal stage. A Jamaican attorney is vying for the presidency of the Commonwealth Association of Legislative Counsel, an organization that brings together legislative drafting professionals from across the Commonwealth. This evening, we hear about her journey, what inspired her to seek the role, and what her election would mean, not just for her, but for Jamaica's legal profession and international standing. I welcome you, Ms. Daly.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And your full name for the purposes.
I'm Michelle Daly.
Michelle Daly.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Daly, I was looking at your bio, and it's safe to say that you wear many hats.
Yes.
You're not wearing one tonight, literally, but talk to me about the journey that brought you here.
Well, about 30 years ago, I got a scholarship from the government of Jamaica to pursue legislative drafting. I did a master's in legislative drafting, and I started my career in the Office of the Parliamentary Council here in Jamaica. Spent about 7 years there, and I wanted to explore and see what else I could do with this degree. So from there, I then took a position in the British Virgin Islands doing law reform, because at that time there was no vacancy here for me to do law reform. And I wanted to see, you know, just to feel out what the options were. And so I went to the BVI. I did 2 years in their Law Reform Commission. And from there, I was recruited by the Cayman Islands government. So I then moved to Cayman and went back into drafting. I was then subsequently recruited by the Commonwealth Secretariat as a CFTC, a Commonwealth Fund technical expert, and posted
I want to pause you a little bit because you mentioned legislative drafting. I want you to just share with the viewers what exactly that entails and what it's about. And then we can do the acronym you just broke up for us.
Okay, so legislative drafting, a legislative drafter is the person who transforms the policy into the actual law. So we take government's policy and we reduce that into legislative language. We write the laws, which are then sent to Parliament, and Parliament enacts those laws.
Yes. So you were mentioning the CFTC, I think.
Yes. So the Commonwealth Secretariat used to have a program where they would take experts, I use that in quotation marks, experts, and have them assist in developing countries. So I was recruited and I was placed in Belize at the time to help them to develop their legislative drafting unit and to mentor and train their local drafters. So during that process, I prepared their jurisdiction legislative drafting manual and secured some young Belizeans who I got funding for, and they went off to study and are still in the drafting department there in Belize.
Amazing.
So I'm very, very, very proud of that.
Absolutely.
From there, I then went to Anguilla as their chief parliamentary counsel. And I then returned to Cayman for a few more years. And then an opportunity arose with the Dubai Financial Services Authority. And so I took that opportunity and I went to Dubai for a few years. And after COVID, I was missing home. So I packed my bundle up and I came back home and I started consulting. So
home being where? Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, because they're major moves you've made.
I call home the Caribbean, to be honest.
Okay.
Because I do float. I've been nomadic for so long that everywhere is home. We run a joke and, people ask me, which home are you in? And I, count it off in my head and then be able to say, home number 1, which is Jamaica, or whichever other place in the Caribbean that I have managed to live or work in.
Yes.
And name it thus.
Wonderful. But for viewers who may not know, what's the Commonwealth Association of Legislative Council?
So the Commonwealth Association of Legislative Council was formed about 42 years ago. It arose out of a resolution of the Commonwealth heads of government, where they thought they would support the work of legislative drafters, which are a scarce niche area of law. There are currently about 3,000 members globally for the entire organization. So legislative drafters are scarce, and one of the things the organization sought to do was to promote cooperation between legislative drafters, between persons who train legislative drafters, and to seek to lift the profile of legislative drafters globally, with the hope that we would be able to get more persons to come into this area of the law and this practice.
Why are people avoiding it?
It's not sexy.
Okay.
That's the best way for me to put it. We do work long hours behind the scenes. Nobody knows who you are. It's not like court where you stand up and everybody knows that you won that case. Nobody generally ever knows who is the actual counsel who drafts the legislation.
So you're the behind the scenes.
We're behind the scenes, yeah.
I understand that. The cameraman here can relate. But why does Jamaica's representation at the highest levels of Commonwealth legal community matter?
Well, I'll backtrack a little and I'll update you as well.
Yes.
I've been, in 2009, I've been in Calc for about 30 years. And when I joined Calc, my professor had suggested that, if you're going to make this a profession, you should join the professional organization. And so I joined, and I would get all the material, the journals would come out, and I saw nothing that was authored by anybody that came from where I came from. When you saw the pictures, there was nobody that kind of looked like me. And when I eventually got the opportunity to attend a conference in 2009 in Kenya, I realized that it was, for want of a better term, an old boys club. But that year, something remarkable happened. They amended the constitution to allow for regional representatives. And so the council, which had previously been just 4 persons, became 14. And so each region gets to elect 2 persons to represent their region. So flowing from that, fast forward to 2017, where I sought election, and I became the first Jamaican at that point.
Congratulations.
To be elected America's region rep. I served 2 terms, and thereafter I was elected vice president, and I served 2 terms. And I then decided that it was time to put myself forward. And so I've just actually gotten back from Singapore, and I can tell you that I successfully beat my opponent, who was from the UK, and I'm actually now the new president of the Commonwealth Association of Legislative Council.
So you're announcing that here on CVM TV.
Yes.
And you're hearing it on Lead Story for the first time, Jamaica.
So I am the first Jamaican, the first person from the Caribbean, first black woman, first person from a small island developing state. It has been an opportunity, I think, long in coming, for small jurisdictions to have a voice at the table. And so I have to thank the support that I've gotten from small offices throughout the Commonwealth. And I campaigned on constitutional reform because I think that is the only way we're going to be able to be more effective in getting our voices heard.
Yes.
Small jurisdictions have very similar challenges to the large jurisdictions, but we don't have the resources. And so we have to be a lot more creative. And we have to use the network more efficiently to be able to speak to each other, discuss the issues we're having, figure out how we can solve the problem, because we often don't have money to throw at it. So now you have things evolving like AI, and
which makes me want to ask you really quickly, what are your priority items now that you've been elected?
Well, one, as I said, constitutional reform. We've had this constitution for over 40 years, and I think it's time for us to sit down and look at it.
And that's the Jamaican constitution?
No, the constitution for CALC, the Commonwealth Association of Legislative Council. To have a look at our constitution and to see what is still working for us and what isn't. We've had some challenges in the past in terms of how we are structured. And just to tidy things up, as I said in my inaugural speech, housekeeping is not sexy. But it's the kind of work that you need to do that nobody sees. It's like drafting, that nobody sees you do. But when you're finished, it improves the circumstances around you. It allows all the things that relate to the work you have to do to be more effective, to be more efficient. So I'm looking at, my tagline was working together to connect us for a stronger and better CALC. And so I'm